real quick. Oh,
There we go.
there we go.
You
I
did
just
it.
I
I don't
just
know what you
started.
did.
I just started it and I think it's working.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good
Okay.
job, Kyle.
Good
Yeah.
job.
Hey,
All right.
teamwork.
All right.
Hey,
Here we
Caitlin, I
go.
have a very fundamental question. The term transit middle housing is creating a lot of confusion with our boards and commissions and residents. Do you know what the definition is and what the background is, and what's really meant by that?
So I totally understand where you're coming from because it says transit community and not just middle housing
Right.
is really where it's coming from. So I will let you know, as far as what we've seen in the regulations, some people are just saying middle housing, and then when they define middle housing, they are then referencing transit community middle housing. The reason it's in there in that way, it's not a good reason, but basically, so the whole requirement that you guys are largely, working your way through right now is out of section 16 in 25-1.
Yep.
In a different section of that same act, in section 11, they established this idea of the, oh my gosh, uh, it's very specific transit-oriented development zones within which they define transit community middle housing. So what they did was when they got to section 16, rather than create another definition, they just sort of pointed back to the definition in that other section, even though it has nothing to do with TOD. You don't have to have transit in your community to be required to do this middle housing piece. It doesn't have to be near transit for it to apply. It's a little unfortunate because it is just extra confusing, and you're going to have communities that are like, yeah, we don't have bus, much less rail. Like, we have no
Right.
transit. Why do we have transit community middle housing? You can probably, I don't know, somebody stop me if I'm saying something legally that I should not. You can probably refer to it simply as middle housing in your community, and then maybe within the definition sort of point back to the section in statute from which you're getting it, if it alleviates it. It is nice because the transit community middle housing is, like a term of art. So when we're talking about it, we all know what we're talking about when we use that exact term. So a little bit of an answer, maybe a solution, maybe not for you, Bill, but
Yeah, it's okay. No, I understand a little bit better now.
yeah.
I'll look at section 11.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay? Am
Yeah,
I?
no, you're
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back. I just wanted to understand a little bit more when you said the benefit, sort of just kind of brass tacks about as communities work through compliance with the law. You were saying that it's a benefit to communities to have it because there'll be the certainty. So I guess I'm just trying to understand how does the state regard it? Like, are there grace periods? This is like really fundamental 101 of like, you've got enabling legislation or you've got state mandates and how that impacts communities as they try to
Mhm.
amend their zoning regs.
Yeah. And again, anyone from CROG, feel free. To my understanding, there's no grace period associated with this. Sometimes, that might be spelled out in statute. And what I mean by predictable, I mean it like as we've sort of seen the referrals, I know, and as the ones that have submitted have been working through it possibly, there's a lot of like process and nuances, and you've got to fix one section and how does it interact with another existing section. So it's going to be effective no matter what, July 1. If you don't have the regulations that sort of help that process along, I think it'd just be probably confusing. And then don't ask me. I mean, and hopefully if you have legal counsel, I would really encourage you to maybe just chat with them to sort of see what this could mean for your community. If you were to get an application, in July before you've had a chance to adopt, like what, maybe ask them what are the scenarios. It's gonna be hard. Like, what are you regulating it against? What are you approving it against?
Got
Um,
it.
so
Okay. All
Caitlin,
right.
can I
Thank you.
jump in on that too?
please, please.
Heidi Smoker from CROG. In terms of lending predictability, there's a lot of questions that come up when you're figuring out how to implement the legislation, including which specific zones. And if you don't have it in place and you get an application, you're going to be making those decisions on the fly rather than having had the space to talk through how you think your town is going to interpret it. So I think it'll just be a bit harder if you do get an application, you haven't updated your regs, and in real time with like the 35-day, 65-day, 35-day,
Yeah.
time period, you're trying to make those decisions on the fly.
And this, I'm going to qualify. I'm going to, qualify this. This may not be the most intelligent question, but if they're coming in under an 8-30G, it's really the parking. That's the one that's key, but the other ones would not be in play. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Good.
I would need to sit with that question a little longer to even know
Because
where
that's the
to
certainty
stand.
I thought you were talking about, is that for those applicants that are not coming in under an 8-30G. But like,
I mean, I think to that aspect of your question, yes. So we're not talking about 830G applications when
right,
we're talking about an applicant proposing some sort of transit community middle housing in your community. That can be anybody. This does not have to be affordable housing. This can be
okay,
9 units of market rate.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
if that's helpful.
yeah, it is. And actually, I withdraw the statement about the parking because that also is not relevant to
Okay.
the 8-30G. I mean, I know some applicants are submitting a needs assessment as part of an 8-30G, but they're not. I guess that's what I need to find out. Do they have to do that as of July 1?
I'm not sure how it relates to 830G.
Yeah.
And others, again, can may be able to shed more insight into this. But parking needs assessments now as it relates to residential development more broadly,
Mhm.
where I've got a little bit about that later on. We are seeing some parking needs assessment language come in with some of the referrals. So we can chat about that too.
Commissioner Roberts added some information in the chat that 830G applications are unaffected by this.
Are not affected.
Correct.
Is that what I heard?
Unaffected. Yep. That
Okay.
830G continues to follow its same framework.
Got it. So now I understand your comment about certainty. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. So that's great. I like click. I have to click again. So I think we've heard a little bit about this. We just wanted to sort of let you share a little bit about what your process has been. I think, we've seen, I think some of this, some of the work we're seeing, the referrals are coming in from town staff sort of leading the charge on it. Curious how much of that, for those that have submitted or, are well on their way, maybe, like what has been your level of involvement? And, again, we've seen some external assistance with some consultants that towns have been able to bring on board, which I think sort of speaks to, the bandwidth that your town maybe has to be able to handle this lift. And then also, as far as your involvement maybe to date, or now those wheels are starting to turn as far as what you're going to be asking your planners about tomorrow. But also maybe is your public hearing the first time that you might see this and really start to kind of get in depth in the conversations here. So kind of just maybe thinking there's going to be a range here, but if anybody wants to share about your process thus far, we welcome that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we actually started a process about a year ago, well before the legislation actually reared its head in its first edition. And it's been a subcommittee run with town staff and a hired consultant because we're just revamping the whole round of regs on their own. But it's nice that we already had that going, because when the laws were changed, we incorporated that into the flow, and so we're doing chunk by chunk of zoning regs. So we did a lot of residential stuff in the last month and a half. I'm
Mhm.
sure you guys saw a lot of our our referrals. We're doing commercial zones next, and then we're going to circle back in and start playing with parking. So but it's been a a long run and a long haul of dealing with consultants, subcommittee meetings, and then crunching them together into digestible bunches. And we give the commission as a whole, um, we were giving them the background documents on what we were going to bring to them
Mhm.
like 3 weeks in advance, so you have time to look at it and review it.
Mhm.
So it's, and I think we've only made it about halfway through, so we're about 4 months, 5 months behind of the original timeline, but we'll get there.
It always takes longer than you think it
Yes.
will. It's good that you had a framework in place, though. That's helpful. What about you, Tom?
We have really good staff in Bolton, and they have prepared a complete set of proposed regulations. The the involvement of the commissioners varies by choice. I made wholesale revisions. Somebody else made a lot of comments. Some people just made a couple, and we're expecting that at our June 10th meeting we'll have something ready to go to CROG for referral.
And we might have gotten Bolton's. Maybe I'm misspeaking. No, you would know.
Correct. We did.
Oh, we
We
did.
got a little bit from Patrice,
A
yeah.
little bit. Patrice. Okay. Go ahead,
And
Sandy.
I believe
So
we
I
go.
think you've gotten our referrals from Canton. We've had a great, Neil Pate is our town planner. And we've had our public hearings and we've been at this for a number of months at this point. So, we've had a good process in Canton.
Yeah. Yeah, Neil's fantastic. And I don't know, and so I was perusing some of the referrals today and I saw Canton's separate, like they said, submitted a parking one. They're one of the communities where I've personally seen the protest petition piece come through. A couple of different sort of parking related pieces. I don't know if I've seen the sort of middle housing related stuff yet, but it could be submitted and just not
No,
pulled on.
probably not. I don't
Okay.
recall
Okay.
that. I recall the parking and I recall, the protest.
Mm-hmm. And shout out to Neil and Kenton. I found it very helpful, honestly, as well. In addition to sort of submitting the regulations with the proposed regulations with the referral, he includes the cover sheet, the little memo that he writes to the commission, and he does a really nice job. Anybody can go in and take a look at Neil's language, or planners can borrow it, because it gives Neil an opportunity to talk, to sort of give a little bit more context, sort of say this is what the legislation is doing, and more than just sort of jumping right into the regulation amendments. That context
Yeah,
was very helpful.
we're lucky to have Neil.
Yeah, doing a great job. Anybody else want to share anything about your process? Okay. So one sort of more specific question, and again, this is you'll answer differently depending on where you are in the process, because again, maybe some of you haven't really had these conversations yet, but hopefully you'll have some takeaways to share with your commissions then. Kind of curious how your town has approached sort of your at least in name, industrial districts. So, I think one of our observations were some towns are including their industrial zones, their I zones, some are not. At this level of review, I'm not sure if those industrial zones are sort of a little bit of a blend of their more like commercial areas, like hard to distinguish from commercial areas. Some I think are definitely more, manufacturing, wholesale, storage and stuff like that. So, kind of just wanted to throw that out and ask folks that have, again, have gotten to this point, what were the surprises maybe that you've been coming across maybe as you've been considering these requirements and trying to implement them in your zoning regulations? Go ahead, Tom.
We have left our industrial zone out, but we have one zone that's called Gateway Mixed Use Industrial Zone, which is basically, even though it says it's industrial, it's really kind of a mixed use commercial zone. So that one is being included.
And we wondered how towns were going to handle this, because it's like if you could look at the name of the district, you could look at the purpose of the district, or you could potentially also start looking at, what are the uses that are included in the district. And the statute doesn't really provide any guidance. It just says, commercial.
My
mixed use.
understanding is that they tried to include industrial zones at the legislature. We're not successful. And now they're going to be back again for another try.
Well, and to your point, there was legislation this last spring session that was contemplating doing stuff and very specifically was calling out industrial. So I can say when CROG was kind of dipping our toe into some technical assistance on this end, we did not. If it was a truly industrial zone, we stayed away from it. Again, consult your legal counsel. But anybody else have any interesting things to share regarding kind of even just more generally, how you were figuring out which districts to potentially apply this to? Okay. Oh, I can scroll instead of click. I didn't realize that. So the next question is, again, depending on where you are in the process, if you are, and if so, how are you talking about design at all when contemplating these changes? Feel free to jump in. Go ahead, Tom.
We're doing a form-based code with a lot of pictures of the different kinds of things that we'd like to see. A lot of pictures, a lot of diagrams.
Yeah.
We understand that it has, in order to do summary review, it has to be pretty detailed.
Yes.
So that's why we're doing that.
Yeah, the design piece is tricky, and I think this kind of goes back maybe to sort of like it's okay to think of this in terms of phases, because this can be a bit of a bigger lift to kind of get into non-discretionary standards as it relates to sort of design and architecture. And depending on your community, like if you're a community that's really relied on special permit processes and that discretion to kind of handle some of this, it's going to be an even bigger lift for those communities probably. Tom, to your point, we're seeing some communities sort of taking a form-based code, like light approach, if you will, using some pictures. They're including sort of building type examples, which I think just sort of help like with that illustrative example. And then within the narrative, trying to be non-discretionary, sort of about roof types, roof materials, siding materials. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So we also included different pictures, especially of roof types, and then did have a list of different materials that we thought would be appropriate. We also did go through the table and look specifically at height to try to address that depending on the zone it was in.
Yeah, and we've got this is not a very exciting slide deck. I apologize. So here's a slide with pictures on it. Breaks it up nicely. So just an example of some of the renderings approach that we're seeing kind of come through. And then I haven't seen anyone do this yet, but I wanted to highlight it as an option. Again, this doesn't have to be a now thing. This could be a future thing if you want to include illustrative examples. But if you've got, especially development within your community that, fits the bill for middle housing that you like or for mixed use that you like, even just taking pictures, Google Street View images and using those. This happens to be an example, I think, of the row homes in Hartford. Sort of like they talk about the housing typology and then they lead with a couple of illustrative examples before they get into their dimensional standards. So it's another way if you're not going the renderings approach that you can potentially accomplish this. But again, these are the illustrative examples, and then when it comes down to sort of those standards, again being specific and non-discretionary. Anybody else on design, or I'd say questions, may or may not be able to answer them, but okay. Seeing roof types come through too. I think Jennifer, I think you mentioned that in particular, yeah. Okay. So I think I've got a few more sort of prompt questions after this, but this is just at this point a slew of observations. Again, as we've kind of been going through the referrals as we get them in, a couple of things. There's a lot packed into this slide, which is probably problematic. You're going to be staring at it maybe for a while, depending on, you know, the discussion we have around it. But a couple of things. So that first one, and versus or. We're referring to some communities. So again, Section 16 in the Act talked about allowing transit community middle housing or mixed use development on any lot in a commercial or mixed use district, basically. Depending on how you read it, I think we talked about last time maybe how it's a little muddy. It could be written more clearly, but it's not. Some communities are taking the and approach where they're including middle housing and mixed use and doing those by summary reviews and reflecting it accordingly. And sometimes they're taking an or approach. We're seeing some communities that are the trend in when we see this is that they're only doing mixed use. So again, this is all of this. These are not legal opinions. We're just pointing them out, what we're seeing. Definitely talk to your legal counsel if you've got questions about this, but we wanted to call attention that we are seeing, you know, a range here. The next one, mixed use limited by dimensional standards or by units. So here again, we are seeing both of these scenarios in the referrals we're getting. And what this means is, you know, mixed use is defined, and then there's the dimensional table, usually looking at, you know, existing or maybe making some slight modifications to your existing dimensional standards in your existing zones, where you're now doing mixed use by summary review. And the dimensional standards in that point, your height, your impervious surface, et cetera, that is what's going to create your building envelope and sort of, you know, limit how big or whatnot your mixed use could be. We are seeing other referrals come in where mixed use is by summary review is being delineated as mixed use with 2 to 9 units. That is what's being subject to summary review. And for 10 or more units, we're seeing those being subject to special permit. So again, throwing out that observation, talk to your legal counsel. This is sort of more of a format question, and I think it'll, sure, go ahead, Jennifer.
So, you know, I was wondering because we've, you know, some of the towns have been using the planned development district to create unique situations within towns that make it work. Do we think that we're going to see any change to more housing given these regulations versus a shift to or from planned development districts to be able to be more creative with the use of, say, commercial and residential in areas where there's already an overabundance of commercial space that isn't rented, but there's still a need for an abundance of different types of housing. So like, do you think that there'll be a way where people will say, okay, well, I'd rather do a planned development district because I don't want to put commercial in there. I'd rather do all residential, and, you know, our town's going to be potentially willing to waive that need for the commercial component. I don't know. I don't know if other towns are experiencing, you know, what we are with an abundance of vacant commercial space already. So I don't know.
I don't think I have an intelligent answer for you on that, or even guess.
Right, because it depends on the town. I mean, some towns are doing really well with commercial. They don't have a lot of commercial space open, but still need housing, and it just depends on what you have and if you can add more commercial, and it's worthwhile for whatever you have for a prospective tenant, versus if you don't have adequate space for needed tenants and you need more housing. I don't know how it's going to shift. And if there's,
Yeah.
if like the PDD is a workaround.
Jen, my naive planner brain says that a lot of the issues with the non-rented um, or vacant commercial space is based off of the way we built or build. And so maybe some of these new builds will, the mixed use will allow those uh, like consistent and reliable foot traffic to be there for the commercial space on the ground floor because you're pairing it with housing versus a lot of our or you're adding more housing so that you have more customers and more foot traffic for those commercial spaces. And then the commercial spaces that are vacant that aren't part of those new builds, maybe they're outside of where that housing is going, might be part of those commercial conversions into residential. Um, but I think the market's probably gonna do the work for you. It's gonna decide, whether commercial is viable because a developer is going to be putting together the math themselves to figure out if it's going to work. They're not going to invest in it otherwise. Um, and there's probably reasoning behind it. So my 2 cents is ask them, like if you're curious, why not? And let us bring it back to us. Let us know why, if you get some commercial proposed, why they see it's uh, worthwhile to invest in, even though you have some vacant space elsewhere.
Because I think, we were talking so much about transit-oriented development and, number one, having those alternative sources for instead of parking spaces. Do we, have bike paths like we're redoing where our trail is going to go? We've made like a big study out of it, and a lot of people are moving around on bikes or e-bikes or other forms of transportation. But then we have certain other groups of people that want to rely more on, especially with the cost of fuel and their unfixed incomes, on, say, the bus line. But then the issue is the bus routes based on where they live can't necessarily take them, say, from Plainville to Southington to get to their doctor's appointments without having to change buses multiple times, or maybe it's too much for them to do that. So we had thought, way back when, what are viable sites to try to do, along major transit areas, and to try to add in the commercial with the residential for just these purposes. And it just is not moving in that direction. We're still struggling with the commercial. So I'm hoping, like you said, we'll see a shift. And maybe, maybe you bring the housing, maybe the commercial will come, or vice versa.
I've got some thoughts on that. But before I do, Tom, especially if you've got something for Jen.
I think it was in 2008, and this was in a previous iteration of the legislature trying to promote housing. There was something called an incentive housing zone. And so we rewrote our regulations to include this. And what we did was we did an and. We said you can build 3 stories, which would have been, that's one more story than we had allowed in Bolton up till that time. You can build 3 stories with the first of housing, but the first floor had to be commercial. And nobody built anything because they wanted to build just housing. So we took that part out of the regulations, and now as we move in, it's just going to be you'll have the option of mixed use, but not the requirement.
Yeah, it's all about that private market. And interestingly, if you do have your incentive housing zone, that is very similar to the priority housing development zone, the PHDZ, if you will, that was also passed newly last fall. And you get, I believe that one may earn you for development that happens within it with a bunch of other criteria, potentially housing unit equivalent points if for towns that are interested in moratoria for 830G, et cetera. I think they're similar in talking with OPM. Those 2 things are very similar and something you could explore. I don't think this is I'm pretty positive it's not answering your question directly. Jennifer. But of note, which I thought was interesting, I want to say it was Newington that on that conversion piece, they have they may have some specific standards. I wonder if they even have specific dimensional standards for the conversion aspect from an existing commercial building to either a mixed use or a residential. I can't remember. So Newington is contemplating that sort of a little differently than I'd seen other referrals. Um, and then the other thing that we're seeing, especially for those municipalities that are choosing to sort of take the either or approach and really kind of focus on the mixed use. Some of the communities are saying, no ground floor retail, right? Like the idea would be ground floor commercial, residential above. A thing to consider, even for those municipalities, possibly is maybe not a strict restriction and saying no residential use, but requiring that you have the active commercial storefront. I think that's sort of where that concern's coming from for a certain depth. I know there's a couple of municipalities that do this in Connecticut and still allow ground floor residential behind it. I think it may potentially help address sort of some of the market issues. Um, and then, I say that because for those of you that were with us, I think it was last year when we had Greg Vaca in, and so he's a developer in Windsor. He was talking about some of these commercial storefronts are just really big, and it's very difficult for tenants to fill them. The square footage for rents is really high, so he was focused on creating a model in Windsor that sounds like it's working of smaller commercial square footages for tenants. So by allowing potentially that ground floor residential piece, beyond a certain depth, you might, help encourage both active commercial and sort of still get that happy mix. I don't know. Um, Maybe I'm optimistic there, but something to think about. Um, let's see. This is sort of just a formatting thing that we're noticing. There's no right or wrong way of doing this at all, but some municipalities are sort of integrating the middle housing and the mixed use piece within sort of their existing, sections and framework and whatnot, and some are creating dedicated sections. So again, there's no right or wrong way of handling it. One might be more easy for you than another. Um, I think the potential challenge might be just ease of, an applicant navigating your regulations. If they're, finding that one section may be difficult if they don't know that it's there, if they don't know where to look. Um, but again, no right or wrong way. Um, Seeing a little bit of a mix on commission review versus staff review. I think the most interesting thing I saw, and I don't know if this is existing, and I actually want to say it was maybe Newington again, actually, that was saying it was going to be administrative staff review if it was 4 or fewer units. It may have also been very specific to conversions that it could be done as a staff review. But otherwise, a lot of these are getting sent to the commission for your final approval. There was one that was also doing a tentative staff approval prior to being sent to the commission for final approval. Because again, these are non-discretionary, they're not requiring public hearings. So you kind of get that recommendation in advance. So let's see. Some regulations or some referrals we've seen have an idea about like sort of alternative compliance. And that as I'm interpreting it, as I'm seeing it, I think it's like these are our standards, but if you don't meet these standards, and we'll allow you to do it, but through special permit, then we'll still allow you to do like the mixed use or the transit community middle housing, but you'll go the special permit route. Like we still want the middle housing, and maybe you want to do like a narrower buffer, a landscape buffer than otherwise required. You can go that route. So I thought that's interesting, obviously, again, for all of this, talk to your legal counsel. One interesting thing we didn't anticipate, and it's kind of, it's small, but in statutes, there are 2 definitions of mixed use. I guess we shouldn't be surprised by this. And I have specific statute references if you want them, but the one I think we were sharing last time is from section 8-1A, and it's very basic. It just says mixed use is basically a combination of residential and non-residential uses in a single building. There is another one that exists in, I think it's 8-13N or M, one of those. And it's a little bit more specific. It lists industrial uses in there as well, which is interesting. And it's technically just very specific actually to those incentive housing zones that I believe you were talking about, Tom. You find it over there. Um, so I don't know that one is right or one is wrong, but it's interesting that there's two of them, and just so that you know, I'm sharing that. Um, we talked about it was Neil and Canton who was providing, in addition to the amendments, a really, really helpful memos that kind of allow you to get into a little bit more legislative context than you would otherwise find, within your zoning regulations themselves. I wanted to just add a reminder, don't forget parking requirements. I think some folks are, again, we've seen some of Canton's, but we haven't seen middle housing. And where we've seen middle housing, we haven't seen parking from others. I think, again, it just kind of goes to the bandwidth and the capacity and kind of doing this in a bit of a phased approach for some. And I wanted to, one note I have that's not listed as an observation, but was related to parking is, so the parking thing is straightforward and yet kind of complicated, honestly. Just trying to wrap your head around it. In a nutshell, with those exceptions I mentioned earlier, right? Municipalities are not allowed to regulate minimum parking requirements for residential, except for, et cetera. One of the municipalities we've seen is following that, but what they are doing, instead of saying this is what your required minimum parking is and having it be 0 or having it be whatever, they're including a recommendation. So it's not a requirement, but it is maybe a signal to a developer that this is, generally speaking, what we might like to see. But again, they wouldn't be able to still deny an application for not providing that recommended parking. But you may or may not find that helpful to know in your municipality. So something to think about. I think I had a couple of just final little question prompts if anybody is getting anything specifically from developers. Are you getting any interest or inquiries? You might not know, it might be too soon. And this might be more like, oh, hey, are you working on those regulations? And might be less of the, hey, I've got a middle housing project, and when are your regulations going to be approved? Anything, hearing anything? Might be too early. And that's fine. All right. Well, we'll be very curious to hear. Again, as sort of Jacob was talking about earlier, the private market is going to drive a lot of this as far as, where we'll see middle housing, penciling out financially. We had that other presentation last year with Don Poland, sort of that financial side of making these things pencil. So it'll be interesting to see where we get our middle housing and where we get our mixed use. So more to come on that. And I think this is maybe my last one. I lied. I think I've got another. Any commissioners out there, commissions, are you having any conversations about establishing conservation and traffic mitigation zones? And if you are, what's been your approach or your thought process, any of this? Anybody out there? I will say, as far as what we've seen, I think we've gotten that I've seen so far one referral with a map sort of outlining a potential conservation and traffic mitigation district. I said zones there. I think it's technically district. And then another municipality that submitted language for it so that their narrative is in there, but no map. So it's sort of like the language is there if and when they choose to establish one. Go ahead, Chris.
Uh, like I said, we've not really talked about these new regulations. But I've been curious about this one for a while, so I'm wondering about your perspective. If you could share, like, what expectation, what are you expecting? What would you expect, or what do you think that the legislator was expecting for what would be a traffic mitigation zone? Would it be a, a dense commercial
Mhm.
district? Is that it?
That's a good
Because it
question.
wouldn't be a
Hmm.
TOD, right? Obviously, I mean, hopefully not a TOD,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, good point. Right? Because this district, so the name is personally, in my opinion, a little wonky, a conservation traffic mitigation zone. I kind of understand it. And I welcome feedback, any commissioners on the line that want to take a guess at this, anybody else from CROG that wants to jump in. Um, Really good question. I have wondered, would it be helpful for municipalities to have a little bit more like thought put behind this, from CROG potentially, because um, I've not spent a lot of time with it. I've not spent a lot of time researching it. I put it into Google one time and I didn't really get anything. So I don't know how much is out there. There's probably zones or districts like this that maybe exist elsewhere. Maybe they're just called something different. So first saying that. The idea behind these districts is again, these are limited in size in your municipality. You may establish no more than two of these districts. No one district may exceed 4% for a maximum of 8% total of, I can't remember if it's of your developable land or of your total land in your municipality, one of those. And then I think there is also a separate approval process through OPM as well. So there's some other ins and outs as it relates to these districts. The purpose of them is to, again, you can no longer regulate or set minimum parking requirements for developments that are 16 units or fewer, except within one of these districts. So again, this is a district that would allow you to regulate for residential development, still having parking. Subject to the same requirements as larger developments, you still must allow developers to submit a parking needs assessment, etc. So as a planner, when I look at this, I think these are areas that are probably, they're not going to be necessarily your walkable pedestrian transit areas. They're going to be areas that um, are still going to be somewhat auto-focused. Um, then also maybe that see quite a bit of traffic. Um, maybe they're busy just because the residents in your community, everybody goes there, but there's a couple that I think of that come to mind, and I don't want to say what they are. But they also have a bit of a regional draw. And so there's just, there's a lot of people moving through them. They're getting, the local traffic and they're getting traffic from beyond the municipality where, legitimately not having enough parking may be of a concern. That's sort of where I'm at right now on this without, doing more research. I want to pause there and see if anybody else has more better thoughts than I do. Anybody? All right, so maybe we'll circle back on that. And actually, I wonder if it feeds into my next question. So good job, Chris. Thanks for that. Leads us to our final question for you as it relates to this is sort of what type of additional assistance might be beneficial? Is it more information, trying to look into what these districts possibly could be? I think if best practices could exist for that, that could be helpful. Can't say that what we'll find, but that's an option. We talked about some communities are sort of taking that form-based code approach. Um, would exploring that be helpful for municipalities or legal assistance, particularly for municipalities that don't have legal counsel? Those are just, I don't know, I'm just spitballing right now. So any thoughts that you guys have, additional assistance that whether it's CROG or if you could wave a magic wand that you could have right now? Or more time. If I could freeze time for you. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would just say like you were kind of getting that. I mean, I would be interested definitely, and I think I would think other commissioners would as well to know kind of examples or have some guidance for that. Because
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not a planner, but I try to keep my finger on the pulse, and That's not so, like you were saying, kind of. It's not something that I've ever heard of or come across.
Mhm.
Um, and I can, I mean, I'm, I'm pretty in touch with kind of the way things are moving in the planning world, decreasing parking, general parking requirements, particularly, but even just parking where possible. Um, but a lot of commissioners are kind of used to that more old school, hey, you got to dictate parking. So I anticipate that if you give them the opportunity to be like, hey, you can no longer dictate parking except for these areas, they're going to want to say, hey, well, let's max that out.
Mhm.
Let's control as much as we can.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think some guidance would be really good there to say, hey, this doesn't necessarily always apply, but if you're looking maybe kind of the areas like you were saying,
Mhm.
highly trafficked regional areas,
Mhm.
car oriented.
Yeah, and we might
Yeah.
maybe we'll do some research and find other areas where it makes sense. The nice thing about this one, this is not a required, piece. I don't remember when it goes into effect or technically if it's already gone into effect, but it's not a required piece. It's optional for town. So, we do have time to do a little research potentially for you all. See what we
Caitlin,
come up with.
uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Mhm.
thank you for offering the assistance. And I was wondering if we have time to go back to our town planner and the other commissioners to get some ideas and maybe pose them back to you.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know how that's affected for towns that have submitted a referral or not. I don't know if that process is going to vary at the top of my head. I'm rusty. Um, but certainly, and we can figure that out if folks are, in the position of technically having an open public hearing, if you're in that boat. Um, but yeah, no, we were able to provide, limited more direct technical assistance on some of this stuff for some communities. Haven't actually, I don't know that we've seen much of those referrals, if any of those yet come in. And I think we had also offered, if you have something in mind and, before you submit it, certainly feel free to, if you want a second set of eyes on it, and we're able to, we'll take a look. Um, do I do I want to send all my wishes to Jacob right now because we only have a handful of these in, but he's got his work cut out for him. So to the extent that you can send him a sneak peek in advance, he's going to have potentially everyone's got the same 30-day window, depending on how many he gets in at one time. He could be reviewing a lot of regulations. But yeah, no, if we're able to, we'd certainly wouldn't mind taking a look again with the caveat that I pretty much have put on every single screen and presentation you've been seeing over the last year that, what we say is not legal advice. And certainly to the extent that, you guys have legal counsel at your municipality and can rope them in. But yeah, yeah,
And
Tony.
Tony,
Thank you.
if you have any questions, just feel free to shoot us or like if you go back to your commission, come up with some questions and things like that. If that's what you're talking about too, feel free to email us whenever. We're
Mhm.
always here, and you have my contact, so happy to help. And just to clarify, we did receive a few, or at least Newington's we helped them with, and then got
Oh yeah,
theirs in.
you're right.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Mhm. Forgot about that. Mm.
Caitlin, I want to flag in the chat. Um, the parking needs assessments are allowed come July 1. That's section 19, the special session, Public Act 25-1. And then Commissioner Roberts asked if there's a way to share what other people have sent in as referrals so that the RPC doesn't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
We can, and I'm pretty sure the answer to that is yes. Figuring out how to get them to you in the easiest way possible so you can take a look through them. Um, and it's just, again, I was kind of poking around in there. Jacob's sort of been in it up to his eyeballs. And it's just look around at a few because there's a wide variety. And I was chatting him earlier and I was like, there's one requirement, like pick middle housing or whatever, like one middle housing that's come out of the legislature. And so far, we've gotten 12 referrals and there's 12 different ways sort of how everyone's approaching it. So definitely look at more than one. But yeah, I think that would be helpful. I found it helpful just to kind of go through and see what everyone else is doing and how they're approaching it. So we should be able to do that. All right. Anything else?
Actually,
If you think of
I
something
have a
later.
question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, along those lines, because when you were asking on the screen, it says one type of additional assistance. Was it just related to the conservation and traffic mitigation, or no? Okay,
No.
yeah,
You could
okay,
wave a
that's what I
magic
thought.
wand
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we could help you with anything. What would it be?
Yeah, because I was just curious to the extent communities are using consultants, if we're seeing, a
Mhm.
sort of a consultant preferred approach for like certain size communities. So I agree, it would be very helpful to see what are the options, and maybe do certain options more, for lack of a better word, appropriate for certain size
Mm.
communities. And our consultants sort of recommending those approaches. So yeah, I think it would be great if CROG could like do a whole grid, or at least,
It's
a
been
sheet like,
started. I don't know how official it is, Lisa.
yeah, but just, yeah, so you can sort of, commissioners can kind of stress test, or do not stress test, I guess, do their due diligence
Mhm.
when they're reviewing, consultants' recommendations.
Yeah, and I will say we've seen again mix. There's definitely quite a few that look like they're just, coming from the town, maybe working with the commission, local planner sort of leading that process for them. And then we've seen I want to say it's at least two. If others have been involved, I'm not sure. But I believe the firms Tyche and IMEG are firms that we've seen submit. And to that note, I will add, without getting into the weeds, and feel free to reach out if you want more information. But for communities that really feel like they need some additional assistance, for towns that have the budget, through another COG, they issued an on-call planning assistance RFQ, and they have a list of, I think, 7 pre-qualified vetted consultants. I know IMEG's on there, I think AKRF, SLR. I'm not naming all of them. We can send the link and you can, have a conversation with your planner whether or not it's in your town's budget to be able to reach out to them for some assistance. But they're another cog got the list and sort of did the pre-qualification, but any municipality in Connecticut can tap into that just because of how the cog framework is. So there is that is already out there. And I will say this is actually one of my updates that I've got coming later, but I'll just save time on the back end. CROG is working to develop an RFQ for land use attorney services, so sort of a similar on-call framework. Whereas if a town needs them and it's, it could be a POCD update probably if you wanted to, or if it's specific to middle housing or implementing your congestion and traffic mitigation district. Our hope is to develop a similar list of pre-qualified individuals or firms that could provide specifically sort of that land use attorney service.
Great.
So I don't have a timeline on that yet. We are trying to expedite it, but it's not out yet, so it's going to take some time.
So this pre-qualified list was prepared by another COG. Is that what I heard you saying?
Yeah, they put out an RFQ and a number of planning firms responded to it, and so now municipalities can work with anybody on that list. Is my understanding. There's probably some ins and outs, for documentation on the procurement side of things, but you can do that, and it is paid for by the individual towns. So
Right,
if
right.
Avon wants to work
Yeah.
with one of them, they reach out to the firm directly and they
And we are working with someone. That's why I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand the whole consulting service
Yeah.
and whether or not there's like a certain approach they're taking, and maybe
Yeah.
when you've seen ones that have come in from town planners, that have been driven by town planners, is there a
Mhm.
certain approach? It sounds like, there's a lot of options, and it's probably very overwhelming
A
for
lot of
many of us
options.
who are commissioners.
Lisa,
Yeah.
real quick, so when we get one in, or at least my observation for referrals that are submitted by town planners and town planners alone, it's usually just text edits, um, and changes directly to the existing regs.
Hmm.
The towns that have been at least working with Tyche, they are leaning more of the, like Caitlin said, form-based code light, with the visuals.
Mm.
I will say though, there is a sense of there's a decent spread when it comes to rural, suburban, and no urban yet because we just have
Mhm.
two of those. But uh, they are. It seems like the Tyche, the firm, is respecting obviously the typology of the town. So I think Willington came in and it was a bit more uh, uh, reserved, I would say,
Hmm.
and a little bit less of in detail. So that's a little bit on their part as a firm, but then also each one is, I can tell, heavily edited by the commission or by staff or whoever it is, because while there's similarities, there are differences for sure. So that seems to be the trend as of right now to hopefully answer part of that question.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So we currently don't have a town planner. So we were one of the towns that used Tyche, and they presented everything to us. They were virtually, obviously not in person, and we went through line by line by line and made whatever modifications as a commission we felt would be best suited for the town. They're great to work with.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of them. They're getting good at it. Maybe they're getting fast. Maybe. All right. And again, if you think of anything after this that you think we can help with, if it's just a second set of eyes, or anything more specific, doing a little bit more research, let us know. And we'll keep you posted on the land use attorney piece. Um, okay. That was it for me. And I was number 4 on this slide, so.
All
Okay.
right, next we have the CROG updates.
Kyle, you want to go ahead and give a warehouse update?
Sure, happy to. So some of you have heard our previous updates on the regional warehousing study. That's been going on for about a year and a half. We are about to complete it. It is basically all done. It's posted on our website. I'll post a link in a second, but it's available for public review if you want to take a look at it. But we've been looking over the past 18 months with our consulting partner WSP in various towns. We're on our advisory committee. Bloomfield, Windsor, East Windsor, Manchester, Enfield, most of the towns that are like in the 91-84 corridor that are warehouse targets have been advising us on this project. Some of the things that are in the report, thanks whoever dropped that in the chat, the project page is in the chat. It has all the deliverables so far. Some of the things we looked at were best practices for zoning. So as a commissioner, if you get a warehousing application, what do you look at? What are some best practices? What have other towns done? I'd say the one piece that's significant might be the traffic impact study. We actually collected real on the ground traffic information from existing warehouses. So you actually can real world some of the numbers the developers might be telling you in terms of traffic impacts. We think that's significant. And there's also a market study. So it's going to tell you where the demand will be likely in the future, in the next 10 years or so in the region. Where can you expect warehousing applications to pop up? So that's available on the website. It says linked in the chat there. And if you have any questions, reach out to myself or Jacob. We're both on that project. So that's the quick summary for the warehousing study.
Okay, and I think Heidi for housing strategy.
Sure. I have 2 updates on the regional housing strategy, and I'll throw a few links in the chat in a second. We just published on our webpage the more detailed report of the data analysis for the region. Many of you may have attended the December presentation by the consultant. Well, this puts it in a narrative form and paints a picture. I highly encourage that you take a look at it and also share it with your fellow commissioners. The second update is over the summer, we're going to be filming 4 training videos about housing. The intent is that these are things you can watch on your own time. We would encourage you to maybe watch one during one of your commission meetings. The 4 topics, one is just the fundamentals of land use and housing. Then we're doing one or 2 videos, one we're calling little a and the other big A, not the official names, meaning what is affordable housing in general. So teaching all the various terms, and we're talking about AMI and percentage of AMI, etc. But then another video on Big A, which is 8-30G. So we think that'll be especially useful for new commission members who housing is brand new to them. I think it'll be a good refresher for those of you who have been serving for some time, but also good for your Board of Selectmen or Town Council members who maybe don't know very much and they can sit and get up to speed. And then there's a 4th topic too that we're working on. And so we hope to release those by the end of summer. And also we think that they'll count towards your housing commissioner training requirements too. So I'll go ahead and throw a few links in the chat.
Great. And I think SN. And for those of you, I think is this your first meeting with us, SN?
Yes.
I thought so. So I'll also, if you'll indulge me, I'll introduce SN super briefly just to say that she is our new principal housing planner, and she's marvelous, and she is really going to have her work cut out for her for, presumably the next 2 years, really focusing on the housing growth plan piece, which we've chatted about before, and we're going to chat about more, but I'll let you take it from here, SN.
Thanks, Caitlin. It's nice to be with you all and in the CROG region and on RP&D. So I'm really excited to getting to work with you and your communities. We just wanted to let you know at the end of May, we had our first meeting with municipal staff about the housing growth planning process. And so while that wasn't the focus of this meeting, we are going to have more information from you at the next RPC meeting about the process and how you can be involved as RPC commissioners and just commissioners in your respective communities. If anyone is eager and looking for some suggested homework before we jump into that conversation in more depth, I'd recommend you review sections 4 through 7 of Special Session Public Act 25-1. And if you have questions as you're reading, writing them down, shooting me an email, any kind of things you're looking for through sections 4-7, come prepared to get into depth in a future meeting.
Okay. And as for me, I was under other, unless anybody else has something else from CROG to add here. And I was just going to flag the hopefully upcoming, soon to be released legal land use attorney services RFQ. So I don't have anything else to add.
All right. On to zoning and subdivision referrals. Um, for the most part, we already got the rundown. I'll be doing the SSPA 25-1 work for a while. I got my work cut out for me. And these are the only other 3 referrals I have besides all of those other ones. So, um, I thought I would just spend time since we already went through the other ones for a little bit. Just spend time on these. Not much to them. In Farmington, 8261 Beanman Road. Um, there's a POCD amendment and a little bit of a map change along with the text amendment that's going on in order to allow for some development there. Both, I believe, single family and multifamily. Um, in East Hampton, um, there is an amendment relating to open space requirements for housing opportunity development. And then in Plainville, proposed amendment to the plan of conservation and development related to commercial and residential zone or goals with some maps attached. And those are just POCD maps, so not zoning maps. And that's pretty much it. None of these have regional significance as far as I can tell. None of them are flagged on our maps as, especially the Farmington one was the only one really to check for conservation protection. Um, but it wasn't protected on our map, so should be good to go. And those will be coming out to you on Monday. And that's pretty much it, besides all the housing stuff.
So next we have a section on what's new in my town. So this is where we kind of go around. You can put your hand up and then talk a little bit about any new development, regulations, etc., that are happening. So would anyone like to contribute to what's going on in their town?
Maybe the
I can tell you in Plainville, we have the POCD regulation revisions, and then we have a couple of commercial spaces that were approved previously a while ago, like a new location for a Starbucks that's actually going to have a drive-through, and a couple of PDDs that are actually now being built, and some are closer to completion than others.
nice. Jen, can I ask what spurred the POCD amendments?
So there was some an applicant that had come before us that had generated a lot of interest from the public. And in the public's interest in looking through, they noticed that there was some page omissions on what was presented online versus what was actually on paper, which looked like it was an administrative issue. And like there were some differences between what was on one page and another based on the sections for mapping that seemed a little bit confusing because the public was seeing that it wasn't transparent. And then there were a couple of comments that were a little bit vague in the description on the pages that needed a little bit of clarification. And there were a couple of things that came through to our commission and to our town council and to you guys, but some of the verbiage when it was actually printed and added in was different.
I see. Okay,
So we're just cleaning it up.
nice. Thank you.
Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, hi everybody. Meg Harvey Windsor. Since we've been talking a lot about housing, so I just wanted to share sort of a trend going on in Windsor over the past probably year or so, year and a half. We've had a huge number of applications and approvals for apartments. And just to give you a sense, we're over the past like year and a half, we're on track to double the number of apartments units in Windsor. We currently have like around 1,100 or so, and we've approved about 900 new ones over the past year and a half, and then another 300 or so are proposed. So we'll be just about doubling the number of apartment units. A lot of these are in buildings that were commercial, so they're conversions of commercial buildings into apartments. But the phenomenon, I guess, that's starting to happen is we're getting a lot of, in recent hearings, the past couple of them, we're getting a lot of people coming out opposing, saying not that they're, against, and I should also add, Many of these that have been approved don't have affordable housing. So we're still below the 10% in Windsor. So the more housing units we approve without affordability, that brings us farther away, obviously, from from being at a good percentage of affordable. But we're getting a lot of people saying enough is enough. We have too much housing. Um, and I asked the question at our last meeting, how does a town know that they have enough housing? There's so much guidance on affordable housing, but just in general, do you just let the market decide? I mean, right now, developers are really hot on housing, on at least in Windsor, apartment complexes. Not talking about single family. These are all apartment complexes, many mixed use, but many are not. So I asked the question and nobody had an answer. So I just put it out there as something to share. I don't know if any other towns are seeing a similar phenomenon.
Meg, I can tell you from what we've had coming before us in Plainville, I talk about adding in affordable housing wherever we can. There's been a couple that were way out of the price range that I think the majority of us in town could potentially afford in terms of apartments. 1 and 2 bedroom. The size of them were also much larger than the traditional size for 1 bedroom apartments, which offers a different opportunity for housing. But, I don't know, in your town, if you're struggling with people that can't afford to stay in your town because the younger population can't afford the rent, and the older population, they can't afford it because they're on a fixed income. And the feedback we're getting from the developers is that it's cost prohibitive for them to go with affordable housing. And as much as they may be trying to be creative with adding in mixed use where they can, there's nobody coming through that is actually going to go formally with affordable housing in our town. And we're having the same problem with, the more apartments you add in, it's the further away from the 10% that you're going to be.
Yeah, we're the same. We always ask the question, are any of these units going to be officially affordable? And most of the time it's no, same thing.
And I think along those lines, you have people that come to a public hearing, and the minute they hear the word affordable housing, they get upset. But there is a difference between it, going towards the 10% versus something being called affordable but not counting towards the 10%. And I think the average person doesn't understand there's a difference. And it's been challenging, I know, for our commission. I don't know if you're experiencing or others are experiencing the same thing of, how much education can we offer to the public on so many of these different concepts? And we spend a lot of time trying to educate, but at the same time, you're trying to run a meeting and not have it go in a direction where, everything is being repeated, but no one's grasping the information, and you're there till, 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Yeah, most of the opposition we're hearing is not, people are not saying they're against affordable housing. I don't know if they just don't want to say that in a public hearing, but mostly what people are saying is they're worried about impact on schools, impact on infrastructure, impact on traffic.
Yeah, same with us.
Yeah. And the developers say, no, these are apartments. They're not going to be families with kids or, very minimal impact on schools, et cetera. But it's, I don't know whether to believe that or not.
Right.
So,
Heidi?
Yeah, I want to try to take a crack at the question of how much is enough. And we've had this conversation with our regional housing strategy consultant, Goman in York. And, you did partially answer it that the market will correct because a developer is not going to, if they're not going to make money because the market's not still there, they're not going to build. The lenders won't lend. Um, in terms of the questions that you get from the public, another deliverable for the regional housing strategy are going to be fact sheets out of some of these questions that you get. So ideally, if you have a public hearing on housing, you have something you can enter into the record that talks more about, well, what does it actually mean for school kids? Recognizing there is at least one anomaly in our region, which is South Windsor when it comes to that. So we are trying to provide you with tools that hopefully will help you with some of those conversations.
And Meg, a little bit on just quickly on whether or not you can believe the developers on the school children piece, at least from what we found during that strategy and the data collection piece of it from our consultants' work, was that you can. That, like Heidi said, the anomaly was South Windsor, I believe. And even to the advice of our consultants was that they will probably see stagnation in that in the future, in the near future, that they won't see the added school children anymore. But that's
Yeah.
all.
And after the data and housing data analysis report was mentioned, I pulled it up and just quickly browsed through. It's got a lot of really good, useful data in it. So I will definitely share that with my fellow commissioners.
Glad. Cool.
And one other quick thing, if I could add, about the whole 10% and how, yes, when you add more market rates, your percentage of affordable decreases. There was a proposal, and I'll look to SN if she remembers, in the legislature to at least study to change from a percentage to a set number. And I don't know if it was for that purpose, and I don't think that went anywhere, but there was at least the potential to look at changing it from a percentage to a flat number.
How convenient. SN has her hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on the 830G point. I want to validate the concerns that the chairwoman and commissioner, I'm sorry, I can't see her last name, Meg had. And so I want to validate what you're saying, but I also just want to say from like a practical standpoint, the denominator of the 830G calculation only updates at the decennial census. And so as you're building units between now and when the decennial 2030 comes out, which is like usually a 2 to 3 year lag, your denominator is not changing for the state's purposes. And so as you're adding units, yes, there's a point where that denominator changes and you do see that decrease. But that's already occurred for this decade. And so if you're adding affordable housing units that qualify as affordable housing developments under 8-30G, and you're heading towards a moratorium, like the number's not changing every single time. The denominator doesn't change every time you add more units. It happens all at once at that decennial census point. And again, I know that doesn't resolve the issue, but it's not an immediate every single time that it occurs. So that's what I was going to say on the 830G side.
I want to make sure that I give other commissioners to share. I actually had a question for you, Meg, and you don't have to answer it. But it's interesting that you're seeing so much development. And I was wondering if any of the developers coming to you are not providing affordable housing, but are any of them asking for assistance from the town as far as tax abatements and stuff like that? It wouldn't surprise me if they still are, just again to make the developments pencil.
No, they have not been.
Okay.
And I think part of this sort of boom for us, maybe because of the amount of vacant commercial space we have on Day Hill in our Day Hill
Conversion,
corridor.
yeah.
And so all of a sudden conversion is looking really good from a financial perspective for these owners of
Yeah.
these huge corporate campuses that are no longer in vogue because everyone wants to work from home.
Yeah. And I will say, we're seeing that in a few communities. And then just on, Heidi had brought up the 830G threshold study. They did not change the threshold, no. They did propose, but I don't know that it passed, unless somebody can opine. They were looking at changing what is eligible again for those HUE points, those housing unit equivalent points that get you potentially to your moratoria. So, did they, SN? I
There,
see you.
there were some changes to the hue points, and I, I feel if anyone thinks they're actually close and wants to have a conversation about hue points, or Caitlin, if that makes sense to do it, 830G hue point extravaganza in an RPC setting, I'd be more than happy to help in that spot. I did remember one last thing I had for Commissioner Harvey, to your point about also trusting what's coming from the applicants. If you don't currently have it in your regulations, chapter 124, the chapter for zoning, allows you to establish in your regulations third-party reviews paid for by developers, which again is a policy decision you make at your local level if you want to put that on your developers. But if you don't know if you can trust, that's a process you do have available to you to hear it from someone else if that's a cost prohibitive path forward for the municipality.
Great, thank you.
Chris, did you have your hand up? Did you want to say something?
I did, but I don't want to take. But the 830G discussion, I'm in Enfield, and we're actually above the 10%. So the time I've been here, we've never had to deal with it or even strive to get it notably higher. But I was curious, Caitlin or the other planners or maybe the other towns, I was curious if anybody does any like density bonuses for affordable housing. I know inclusionary zoning is uh, occasionally used, but I was curious if density bonuses are, whether, height limits or increased density for, that's
I
something
think
that
the answer is
helps
yes.
developers target.
I don't know off the top of my head exactly who's doing it, so would love to hear from commissioners. I think at one point Hartford was, whether it was specific to affordable housing or if it was just going to allow you to, you know, you could provide a variety of things to maybe get density bonuses. And the one thing on that that I would also love if commissioners, yes, you've got something like that. And then B, are you seeing folks use it? Because again, I think so often it comes down to the market as far as like, does that density bonus, you're offering it, but does it actually make sense for them to take advantage of? So, yeah, if anybody's got one in their community, feel free to pipe in.
Would anyone else like to share or to respond to Caitlin's question? Christopher?
Hi, thanks. So we had an application that came in, and so I don't want to go specifically into the application itself because it was withdrawn, but it did kind of bring up a curiosity about agritourism zoning and how different communities are doing it. So I was just curious if anyone had grappled with that themselves or if CROG had looked into it. You have kind of an open space like page that was done on the CROG website, but I don't know if you've done any more looking into how towns are thinking about this because there's, it's just it brought up that there's a high demand. The hearing we did have and the conversations we did have was a really high demand for something, but the sort of in most of their use was okay, sort of by right for an agricultural property, but like once you start having events and things, it starts getting kind of wonky. And so I noticed that like Simsbury had dealt with it, and does have an agritourism zone, and so I was just curious how other towns had done it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any response to Christopher's question or have anything else they'd like to share that's new in their town?
I'll go ahead and just in response to Christopher, I saw that. I think I know which one you're talking about, Weathersfield resident. But I don't know what we've done recently. We can certainly we keep a log of all the referrals. We can probably do a bit of a search for agritourism and sort of see what's popped up and see what folks have submitted to us, in the last maybe 2 years or so. And I'll say, if Jacob, if you're available, I want to say I randomly clicked on two referrals we had recently. They were both sort of under the category of agritourism. They were not so much events, they were actually housing related accessory uses to farms, sort of like an agritourism stay. And the municipalities might be here that are seeing it right now. Actually, they could speak to it. But I thought that was interesting. There was like two unrelated towns, unrelated referrals, but at the same time, they were seeing those from property owners too, not developers. So
I've
unique.
definitely reviewed a decent amount since starting at CROG, Chris, so I can definitely look through and if you want to message me after the meeting to let me know a little bit of specifics of what exactly you're looking for, because there's obviously a variety of what we've reviewed, but yeah, I definitely can let you know. And to Caitlin's point of the housing, I am unsure. I think speaking to the municipalities on what exactly that was, I'm not sure if it was for a stay situation or if it was for the laborers or employment situation to allow housing on site. Um, but I can obviously review and get back to you on that.
Yeah, I want to say it was more like a short-term rental situation, not like a workforce housing piece, but like
I
short-term
see.
rental.
Okay. I might be thinking of Enfield. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Glastonbury recently too, but
Yeah, but
it's
obviously
been a couple crazy weeks, so don't quote me. Jacob can circle back.
we definitely have a lot because obviously for our rural towns, that's their economic development goals, right? So we have it in the tank for you.
Great. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah,
Anyone
Chris.
else?
Yeah, for Chris, we added it as a definition and into accessory use in a couple of our zones. We didn't call it out as a specific zone or whatnot, but we did put it in as on the use tables and just defined it in our definition set. So I can't remember how it if it's a permitted or if it's a special, but it's low key on our end. I mean, we don't have a huge. I mean, depending on who you talk to, we only have between like 4 and 5, maybe 6 active farms left in Manchester, but we did have one application where we did through the process, we added it in specifically as a definition and put it into the use tables. So,
Thank you. I'll check that out.
yeah.
Anyone else? If not, do we have any other business?
Don't believe so.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or anything to add?
Just a request, because if we do the look at the recording, the chat isn't clickable for any of the links that were posted in for reports and things.
Follow.
If when we do send that out for the records, if we can have a sideline just for all those links that we put in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I could put the chat
Cool.
record on posted online as well. Does that work, Mike?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Okay,
great.
cool. Will do.
All right. If there's nothing else to add, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Everyone have a great night. And again, welcome to all our new members. Great to have you here.
Thank you
Awesome.
all.
And thank
Take care.
you. Have a great summer.
Thank you very much.
Same to you.
All right. Bye-bye.